Hey Husker fans, Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald and Husker Extra, and it is time for the 3 keys to Nebraska, Illinois. The Huskers are 2-3, so are the Illini. Neither team has been bathed in glory in the last week. The Huskers lost 45-7 to Michigan on Saturday and then practiced the next day for 2 hours in pads, I guess as an atonement to their poor performance against the Wolverines. And then Illinois lost 44-19 to Purdue. The Boilermakers ran for $198, a lot of yards against the Illini. It was pretty dominant performance by Purdue's offense. Illinois' defense did not really show up, and their offense self-destructed with penalties and a strip sack that led to a touchdown. And so Illinois was left in the dust. Now they go back home to Memorial Stadium on Friday night. And the Huskers will invade that stadium. They played Illinois on Friday night in 2017, and they beat them there 28-6. Nebraska was, I think, 3-2 that year, or something along those lines. Maybe they were 2-3 that year as well. But they beat Illinois, and then they went back home, lost to Wisconsin and Ohio State. Mike Riley era was over. The Matt Rhule era is just beginning, and we are now in Game 6 of that era. And Rhule let everybody know after the Michigan game that people would find a lot out about him and his team against Illinois. It's the last game before a bye week. It's going to be an interesting one, right? Illinois is a slight favorite in this one. I don't think Illinois is probably shown as well as they actually are. They're probably a little bit better team than they have put on the field so far. Nebraska's about what they are. Maybe their defense didn't play as well as it could have against Michigan, but I think the team that we saw against Minnesota is kind of who they are, except they don't have as many running backs or receivers now. The offense in a tough spot, only averaging 18.8 points per game. Okay, let's get to the keys. Number 1, have some haymakers. Well, you know that line that Matt Rhule has about body blows? Put it on the tunnel walk, right? The tunnel that goes to the walk into the stadium. They put body blows on like a what do they call it? A sticker. A decal or a decal, however you want to call it. You can call it whatever you like. They put it on a sticker, right, on the tunnel there. And I think that's great, right? Because what that means is, hey, you're gonna knock a team around for 3 quarters, and when that 4th quarter hits, they're not going to have a stomach, and you're going to be able to land those haymakers, right? And you're going to knock them out because they have been beaten down by those body blows over 3 quarters. Well, hey, that's all great, and I think that Nebraska over time can build into that identity for sure. In this particular game, especially with this offense, I don't envision Nebraska's offense, doing the matriculation down the field, running 65 plays, each one averaging, 5 yards and it all producing exactly what you want it to do. I think Nebraska's got to hit some big plays, and I think it would be preferable if they hit them a bit early in the game. I think you got to put Illinois in a hole and try to put Illinois in a spot where they're making mistakes. And I know that Matt Rhule is not all about, hey, let's go score 14 points right away because then we'll win the game. I understand we're not trying to replicate the Scott Frost era, but there's nothing wrong with hitting a couple of big plays. And I think Nebraska needs to hit a few, preferably in that first quarter, preferably on that very first drive. I think if you get Illinois behind, you're going to put them in a spot where they're making some decisions and panicking a little bit. Nebraska's offense has been poor. This is no other way to put it in the first halves of games. They didn't score against Minnesota, as you may have recalled, right? You remember that game. They didn't score in that game in the first quarter, in the first half. They didn't score in the first half against Colorado, and they didn't score in the first half against Michigan. I think they only had 7 in another game. So let's be honest, it's okay to score more than 7. You can score 14, you can score 21. I understand that Nebraska is comfortable with not making big mistakes and as a result punting and relying on its defense. And if Nebraska hadn't thrown an interception on its first drive against Michigan, maybe that game turns out a little bit differently. But you got to hit some plays too. You got to score points. And Nebraska's not scoring at a great clip. They're going to have to hit some big plays, whether that's Heinrich Haarberg in the option or it's going over the top to Marcus Washington. Somebody is going to have to click, and I think Nebraska's got to hit some haymakers early. Won't be a bad thing if they hit them late either, but if they're down by 21 by then, it might be hard to win. Number 2, hit him up. That's Luke Altmaier, Illinois' quarterback. He has been sacked 20 times this year, 19, I don't know. They've given up 20 sacks. Maybe his backup took up 1. But he's been sacked a bunch, and he's thrown 7 interceptions. Illinois' offensive line is a mess. They've got a couple of injured guys who were playing better than they got hurt against Purdue, and then it got really ugly in the second half against the Boilermakers, who just kind of, went at Luke Altmaier, and they were able to kind of pick apart Illinois' protection schemes. Made it really hard for Illinois to come back, and of course Illinois didn't do that. Nebraska's got to try to be similarly aggressive on Friday. I think they can get after this guy. They may have put a couple of those blitzes in their back pocket once they got down by 21 or 28 against Michigan. As a result, this is a team that I think Nebraska's got maybe a few few wrinkles in there pass rush-wise. Maybe they get Cam Lenhart back. Maybe they don't. But I don't think you need Cam Lenhart in order to get after the quarterback, especially if you're bringing 5 or 6. Altmaier is more mobile than Shedeur Sanders was at Colorado. Sanders liked to stay in the pocket and kind of stayed back there a long time. Altmaier is a guy that you can heat up. He can get out, but he has made mistakes. And so Nebraska needs to try to force the issue on that guy. When you've got a guy that's taken a bunch of sacks, he's fumbled a couple times, and he's thrown a couple picks, try to force him to make mistakes. And of course, the last one is self-serve destruction, and that's what you've got to hope Illinois keeps doing. And some of this is on Illinois. They've turned the ball over a ton, I believe 11 times already this season. They've given up all those sacks, and they are last in the league in penalty yards. In other words, they have the most penalty yards in the Big Ten. So they've made a lot of mistakes. This is a sloppy team that I think is more talented than their record suggests. I'm a little surprised that they didn't beat Purdue. I kind of thought they would. I was a little surprised they weren't more competitive against Kansas. I think Kansas is a 7 or 8 win team. But Illinois really did not compete in that game. They lost by 11, but believe me, it was way more lopsided than that until the very, very end. And so Illinois has not been as good of a football team this season as I anticipated they would be. I kind of think Nebraska is about where I thought they were going to be. The one difference is I thought Nebraska would be 3-2 coming into this game instead of 2-3, because I did think Nebraska was going to be playing kind of a lousy Colorado team instead of a pretty darn good one. But they flip-flopped, okay? Colorado was the better team that I thought they'd be. Illinois is not as good. I mean, when I started looking at the schedule before the season, I was like, I think they're going to lose at Illinois. I think they still got enough pieces there that they're going to beat Nebraska. Well, at this point, I think it's kind of a toss-up. This is a game you can get back, so to speak. And if you go into the bye week 3-3, I think everybody's kind of looking around and going, okay, it was a bit of a bumpy roller coaster ride getting to this point, but 3-3 was about what everybody could have expected. I don't think a lot of people anticipated them beating Minnesota. They didn't. I don't think anybody anticipated them beating Michigan. They didn't. So if they go into this game, and it's again a toss-up, they win this toss-up game, they lost the toss-up game at Minnesota, you go into the bye week 1-2 in Big Ten play. You're not out of it yet. Believe me, I don't think any Big Ten West team is going to win this division with fewer than 2 Big Ten losses. So if you're still in that range, you're still kind of in it, and you might even be in it with 3. You just never quite know. But Nebraska needs Illinois to stay Illinois. They need Illinois to make the same mistakes. If Illinois were to come out and play clean, like Illinois did in 2020 when they came in on a COVID year and they beat Nebraska 41-23, I think Nebraska's going to be in a tough spot here, because I think Illinois maybe has a little bit more talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball, especially on the defensive line, maybe especially at receiver. They have a little bit more. I think Nebraska's played better football, but Illinois has slightly better players. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one. Goes 4 quarters. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure that it won't come down to the last few minutes, but if Nebraska can get an early lead, they can heat up Luke Altmaier and force some mistakes, and Illinois stays Illinois. I think that's a recipe for a Husker victory. Okay, that is our 3 keys for this week. I'm Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald and Husker Extra.